Oh, okay. This week on Brothers Tech Center, we're going to be installing an electronic gauge cluster. I'll be telling you about why this is so good to install, how easy it is to install, so let's get started. Over the years, I've installed plenty of these kinds of instrument clusters in all the different years that are available. First thing I always do, though, is read the instructions anyway, because they come up with new stuff here and there, and I want to make sure I don't miss anything. So regardless of how confident you are or not, start with the instructions first. So after I've got the instructions all read out, we'll get a game plan going up. Where are we going to put the control box? How are we going to lay our cables out away from exhaust and make it look like it's original? It's just not some wire going across from point A to point B kind of a thing. So take a little bit of time and really think about how you're going to lay things out, because you want to do this once. You don't want to find out the hard way you put it too close to the heat or moving parts or anything like that. So a little bit of time right here is going to go a long way. Where do you think we're going to put this thing? In order to find a good place to put this, I think I'm going to need to take out all the old stuff first and really get a good look and get all the additional wires and everything out of the way, so we've got our bone stocks to look at, and then we'll decide. So while Simon's inside the cab going ahead and getting everything out and prepped, I'm going to go ahead and be doing the same thing on the outside. One of the things you want to do, first of all, is disconnect your battery so you don't have any problems with grounding out any electrical wires. So what I'm doing here is I am taking off the old oil pressure line. Generally, you're going to find all your 350 oil pressure sending units or pressure lines are going to be back here right next to the distributor, and I'll be taking out the old temperature sending unit also. So one of the things you got to make sure you do is get a bucket underneath your radiator and start draining it right away in anticipation of replacing that temperature sending unit. All right, so I'm going to get this old gauge cluster out of here. Now sometimes you have to drop the steering column down some in order to get it out, or at least get your gear selector here down and out of your way, and then we'll see if this comes out or not. We've already got our speedometer cable disconnected from the back. We got to be real careful we don't scratch anything up here. So give me a minute for this. I'm going to get some plastic spatulas to make this easier. So these right here, these are really nice and handy when you're working on something like this. Really, to be honest, I should put tape around to make sure I don't scratch anything, but I'm gonna go for broke. Not to mention, when I put this thing together a long time ago, I put tape around the edge to make sure that it'd be okay. All right, well, it does look like we're gonna have to drop that steering column some, but I'm more than likely not gonna have to take it down all the way. Let's find out. So I got the steering column down. Hopefully it's enough. I didn't want to take it all out down here because it's a little bit tough to get the whole thing back up and get all my bolts aligned. So let's see if this is going to work. All right. Good. And now I just need to disconnect everything nice and careful like. Good. Can you give me a little 1/4-inch wrench so I can get that ground off of there? So this was really buried up in there, and it took a long time to get it out too, because we didn't want to take the distributor out and everything. Now what you can see here is we've got a T going on. This is an oil pressure sending unit, but this right here had an oil pressure line going to an actual analog gauge. So this took a bit of time to get out. I'm going to go ahead and put this in now. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself putting this in, but we're already here. So this right here is a bit large, and it won't go right into the original spot without a little bit of help. So all we're going to do is just get a bit of an extension like this, This will simply go into the block, and then I'll be able to screw this on top like this. Now, normally, when you're doing these types of sensors, you don't want to use any thread sealer on there or any thread lock, because you have to have the sensor grounded out to the engine block. But that's not the case in these. Because that was such a problem in the past, now they have a separate ground going to these, and we don't have to worry about that. So for that reason, I am going to put just a little bit of thread lock on there in order to make sure that I don't end up with any oil leaks back there, because it is really hard to get back there. So a long time ago when I built this truck, I used the Pro 20 electrical wiring kit. It's one of my favorite. One of the reasons I like it is that it is labeled. The wires are labeled every 4 or 5 inches. So it's also color coded, original GM color code. So the green was your high beam indicator. You'll know that by the color green, and it's labeled right here. Here we've got our pink wire. Pink wires are generally your ignition on or off. So this is a 12 volt ignition. Here we've got the, let's see, that is the oil sending unit. So we won't be using this one anymore because we've got a new wire, and this one here is for our temperature. We won't use that anymore, but we'll find our left, our right, and miscellaneous things like that. I'll get all these labeled up, and it's going to make our installation a lot easier.
Tell me when.
So I'm going to go ahead and, like I said, go out of order a little bit. I decided to go ahead and put all my sensors in and then feed all my cables into where my control box is going to be, and then I will go ahead and wire everything off all at one time. Now, before I connect my sensor to my pigtail here, I'm going to get just a little bit of dielectric grease. I'll put some on the end right here, so that it helps keep corrosion away and helps keep conductivity up. I'll also put some on this little rubber boot here. And then in the future, when I have to take this out, or if I have to take this out, I should say, then it'll be a lot easier to get out of there. Without that, it might kind of fuse in and then really come off hard and break when it comes apart. So this is just a little helpful trick that don't happen. So here's our old speedometer cable. That's not going to work with our computer system, but this right here is. Now, if you've got an LS conversion and your automatic transmission's electronic, this will already be on that transmission, and all you got to do is plug that in and you're all ready to rock and roll. If you've got a 350 or a 400 turbo trans like this one does, we're just going to screw this in. This will give an electrical pulse that'll go to the control box and tell our instrument cluster what to do. So what I want you to notice right here is that this basically just looks like a regular old end of a speedometer. So you can't see the little cable down there, it fell in too far. But that's what that looks like. So we're going to go ahead and screw this on. Now this has got a rubber seal on here, so what I did is just put a little bit of transmission fluid on there. If you put a dry seal up on something, sometimes it'll just stick too hard, and when you try to take it off in the future, it'll be too much trouble. So a little oil help you out. Now this right here is the pigtail that goes into that little sensor. Again, we're going to put a little bit of dielectric grease. You don't want to get crazy with it. If you get too goopy on there, then it can actually give you problems. Now you might be thinking to yourself, all these pigtails, how do I tell the difference and who goes where, and am I going to mix it up? No, you're not, because they all look different. So you can see that the oil sending unit pigtail looks similar to this, but they will not fit into each other. This is the temperature right here, and this is going to be going to our speedo. Now this is the fitting that came out of the top of our intake manifold right here. And when I put on sensors, I generally want to put them as close to the thermostat as possible, because that's going to give me my most accurate reading of the highest temperature part of the engine, generally speaking. Now this is the temperature sending unit, and you'll notice it just has this little skinny guy down on the end. That's obviously not going to fit in there. That's okay, because we've got a lot of different fittings to choose from. So this is going to go straight into there, and that'll go in. So I'll put this piece in first, and again, I'm going to be using just a little bit of Loctite. You couldn't get away with that in the past, but you can get away with that now, because if you look in here, you'll see there's actually two different prongs in there. So one of those prongs is for the ground. Now you can't get away with that on old sensors, but you can on this one. I'll put just a little bit of thread lock on this too. Now this is a really delicate sensor right here, and you have to be really careful. You'll notice that on the end here, that is a 3/4 inch. Now if you tighten this up like you'd normally tighten up a 3/4 inch, you're going to snap that right on off of there. All you want to do is put this on and get it pretty much kind of like baby snug, and then double check for leaks and stuff, because just a little bit too much pressure and you're going to pop that baby off of there. That's a bummer right there. That is not going to fit. I thought I was going to get enough room. I didn't think necessarily the pigtail was that big, but that alternator is definitely in our way. So what I'm going to do is take this all back out again, put a plug in there, but over here on the side, there's another port that I'm going to be able to use. So I'll go ahead and take this out, and then we'll go ahead and put it in. When we put our wiring back in, we'll just make sure that we use some heat-resistant wire loom on this to protect them. So this wire loom right here, it is heat resistant, and you can see what happens when you cut it on the end. It gets a bit frayed. So to make that look better, we're just going to get a little bit of shrink wrap and put that over the end, and then we'll shrink wrap it up, and it'll make it look all nice and professional like. Here's the 3 different cables that we're going to need to feed through the firewall. Now they're nice and long. You can shorten them up. I'll show you how to do that a little bit later. But what I want to make a point of right now is rubber grommets. So wherever you're going to be going through a firewall, anywhere you're going to have metal that you might have the cable rubbing on, sooner or later it is going to short out. So don't think this covering right here is going to protect you from metal. You have to have a rubber grommet in it. So now I'm going to feed this through that hole that already has the rubber grommet. I'll clean up all my wires here, make sure it's nice and neat, and then we'll climb up underneath, get that all set up. Okay, so I'm feeding these wires to you.
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, hang on. I got to kind of figure out which way I'm going to feed this guy. The first wire we're going to be working with is our ground. It's the first thing on our instructions here. Now I want you to take a look at the control box, and you'll notice that there's quite a few grounds. Okay, so here we've got the dimmer, there's a ground and a signal, we've got fuel input, we've got the pressure input, temperature input, and speed input. Now your pressure, your temperature, and your speed input, it already has black wires in these cables right here. So that is going to be the ground that you're going to be attaching to that particular spot, speed, temperature, or pressure. But these other grounds right here, the top and the one right down here on the bottom, that's going to be going to your frame. Now I like to take this actually a little bit further than most. I like to take this ground right here and these other grounds and actually attach it to the engine block and or to the frame. So I'm actually going to be using some pretty long grounds going down and attaching that. But more grounds is better than less grounds. So make sure that these are really, really good. You got to make sure you're on clean metal. Put a little bit of dielectric grease on there. Make sure they're not going to come loose. You're using solder on there and some shrink wrap. I'll show you what that looks like in just a bit, okay? This will be the ground that I'm going to attach to the engine, so I want to put an eyelet on that. And what we want to do to make sure that we're not going to have any problems with it in the future is we'll put some shrink wrap on it. Then we'll go ahead and put the eyelet on. And we will crimp this down, and then I'll actually solder just a little bit on the tip where the wire is extended. This way we know there is no way we're going to have interrupted connection on that. So I'll crimp it right here. A little solder right there, then I'll heat up the shrink wrap and we'll be good to go. Now here's all the cables. I grouped them all together. I also have some grounds in this. I ran it up over the steering column, and I've got it going to the left of my electrical fuse box right here. And what we're going to be doing is getting Velcro and put it on the back of this, and then we'll stick it right up underneath the dash right here. I'll have all the wires be nice and long, so I'll be able to work with everything nice and easy like. And then if there's any trouble in the future, you'll have a nice long wire to work with also. So we've got all of these cables here, and then right here what we're looking at is all the wires that went to the gauge cluster, so high beam, gas gauge, etc., and we'll be attaching those right here. So I'll go through that one by one so you know exactly where everything's going. When I do it, I'm going to start at the top and I'm going to work my way down. So I'll be able to put one wire in, then bring the next wire down. This way everything will be cut to perfect length, and we'll have it grouped at the top nice and neat, and we'll be able to just put it up in there and be able to get our access to it whenever we want. So I'm going to start on that now, I guess. So my instructions are pretty clear. We got grounds, we got a 12-volt constant, we've got ignition power. So I'm going to get all those wires found and routed to where I want my control box to be. So here I can see I've got a constant 12-volt right here. I can use this right here. This is a labeled ignition, 12 volts. This was the old power line that went to my gauge cluster. So now we can see that when the key is on, it has power. So we'll go ahead and find each wire, like left turn signal, right turn signal, high beam, etc. We've got our cables right here. They're all set up. And what I'm going to be doing is kind of going out of order with the box. But the reason being is that I'll find my DIM and I'll put it in first. And then I'll go ahead and next is going to be engine. Now that would be if I had like an LS engine in here, computerized LS engine. And then that would be my warning light. Right here we've got brake. This particular year and make doesn't come with a brake emergency still on warning light. Here you've got your high beam, your left turn signal, your right turn signal. This is 4x4. You get a lot of extra things with this thing that we're not going to be using. It's not a 4x4. You have gear selector. You've got weight if you're going to be putting this in a diesel truck. And then we've got dome input, warning out, and miscellaneous other things like that. That again, we won't be using on this because you get so many different functions. But I'm going to get this all set up first on the right side, and then I'll go ahead and set up everything on the left side, and then I can do it wire by wire, keep everything nice and neat. So give me a little bit of time to work on this. I'll come back in a bit and show you what it looks like. Now your gray wires right here, that's what supplies the lights to everything, your gauge clusters and miscellaneous things like that. So when you turn on your headlight switch right here, that's going to get power, and this is going to be used in the DIM right here. And what's going to happen is we're just going to go ahead and put that right in there, and then when we turn on our headlights, it'll make the proper adjustments on our gauge cluster. Now, when I'm going to be installing these wires, you don't want to just cut it and leave the end all frayed, okay? Because it just doesn't hold that well, and after time, it'll come off a lot of times. So what I like to do is simply get a solder, a little bit of soldering iron, and then I'll just solder that in there, and then it'll be nice and tough and strong so that when I put it in here, it'll last a really nice long time. So just like that. Okay, that's good. Here you can see what I've done on the right side. Those are the only wires we need plugged up right now. Now we've got the switch input and we've got the display cable. I'll be installing those a little bit later. I've got a zip tie up here so I can go ahead and put those wires through, and then when I'm done, I'll tighten this up a little bit, make it a little bit cleaner. Now I'm going to be starting on this side. Now the first one is dim adjust, and that is on your brightness of your gauge cluster. You can buy another little kit and it can give you more adjustments. And like I said, there's a lot of different things that you can do to this, so you should check it out and see all the different options you've got. Now the next thing we've got, we're not going to be using this dim adjust right here. The next one is your fuel input. Now you got your ground and you got your signal. So I've got the old signal wire from the old gauge cluster, and I can go ahead and use it. For your ground wire, what's recommended is you actually run a ground all the way from here all the way back to the gas tank, so that you make sure that you've got an excellent ground just for that. And you'll see that also carried out in these other ones. So for instance, your pressure input, it has its own ground that you specifically want to get just from the cable. It doesn't go to anything else. The same thing goes with your temperature input. That is a ground that is specifically coming from this cable right here. And you can tell because they're easily black or red. So you know exactly who goes where and all of these right here. So let me get all this stuff set up, and then I'll tell you a little bit more later. Cables come a lot longer, the cables for the sensors, than what you need, so you can go ahead and cut them off. When you do, make sure you're using proper wire stripping. These are really fine little wires, and it is easy to mess them up if you're not careful and you don't have the right tools. Make sure that these are just about, I don't know, 1/4 inch long probably, maybe 3/8. If it's too short, when you go ahead and install it in the control box, you may not get electrical conduct. And if they're too long, they might contact each other, and then you would get erroneous readings or do damage to the box. So just make sure that everything is a nice length, and take your time, you'll be all right. Got all my sensors hooked up for my cables here, and then I just want to show you all the different options you got. Now here you've got a cruise control, you got speed out, that can also be used for cruise control or adjusting your radio volume, different things like that. You've got a tack out, you got tack warning if it goes too high on your tack speed. Now we don't have a tack in this, customer doesn't want to put one in, we're not going to be worrying about that either. Here you've got ignition power, so that's only when you have the keyed ignition. That's our pink wire. Then we've got 12 volt constant, which we have, and then we've got our ground right here. You can also see that this is GPS and TPMS ready. Don't know what that means, but it sounds cool. Just wanted to talk a little bit about why I did this like this. Now, if I was building this from scratch, I probably would have taken my fuse box there and I would have moved it over to the side, and then I would have had more room for this. But wherever you put this, you want to make sure that you can get your hands on it. You don't want to put it like way up deep where you can't get a hold of it. You don't want to put it behind the gauge cluster so that you have to take it off in order to get to it. And the reason being is, let's say for instance a few years down the line, one of your readings aren't coming up. Well, you're going to want to be able to get a test light on these and see if they're getting contact here or not. So you want to have it readily available to you if you have to check anything like that. What I'm going to be doing on this one, because I got limited space up in here, so we're just going to put Velcro on the back, and then I'm going to be able to just take this and Velcro it right up and pull it down whenever I need to double check anything. So just take some time and figure out where you're going to put it. Make sure that you've got plenty of access to it. And then I know that when you're doing wiring, it is seems really cool to make all the wires really tight and hard corners and things like that. The problem with that is if you have to mess with this in the future, you won't have enough slack wire to go ahead and cut an end off and put it back in. So give yourself a little bit of slack in the wiring. Don't try to make it too tight, because that might give you problems down the road too. So next, I don't know, I think I can put my gauge cluster in. Next, what I'm going to be doing is taking off this face right here and go ahead and install it on our new gauge cluster. So it's not a big deal on this. It just has the screws on the back side we'll take out. They'll align up with the face here, gauge cluster. And we've got some extra felt in this bag that comes with the kit and some screws to help hold everything together. So I'll get this all done, and then I think we can put it in. Let's see. The kit comes with these really long screws. They're going to go in where they obviously fit. We're going to make sure that our gauge cluster's down nice and flat on our face there. And when we do these screws, when we're tightening them up, we don't want to just grab one and torque it all the way down. First, we want to get everybody snug. Then we'll go back and snug it up again, and then we'll go back and snug it up again. The reason you don't want to just grab one of these and torque it down is because it could shift things and get them out of alignment. So get everybody snugged up, and then just go around once or twice or 3 times in order to make sure it's all tightened up nice. Gauge cluster is all ready to go in, so what I like to do is put tape around the edge, and that just helps protect it when I put it in. And all we're going to need to do is just plug that in and slide it on in there, and then screw it right back in with the original screws that we used to take it out with. So I've already got a little bit of dielectric grease on that, and it is a little difficult to get in, so it might take you a minute. Then we'll power everything up and see how it's looking. So you can see that is really, really cool. Now what we're going to do is go through the instructions, and we're going to be setting up our control box. So we'll be programming things like the speedometer, gas gauge, and there is just a multitude of things that you can do with this. So go through the instructions and see all the bells and whistles you want to have working on yours. I'm going to go ahead and set this all up, and then maybe we'll go for a drive, huh? Now it's time to program the computer. Now, it'll be a little bit different from different gauge clusters and such, but it's going to be basically about the same. So we've got our program switched right down here. It clicks to the left, it clicks to the right. What we're going to do on this particular style is click to the left. We're going to hold that button down. We're going to turn our ignition on. Now we can see that this says setup right here. Now we'll click to the right side, and you can see that it goes Bluetooth, speedometer, tach, volts, water, oil, and we can program miscellaneous things for each of those. Here we have our fuel. That's how we're going to set our ohms for our fuel gauge. All of that information is just sitting right up in here on your instructions. So what you're going to do is your 60 to 66. It's a 0 to 30 ohms, mid-60s and earlier. So we'll just go through the setup, and we'll program it all. And you can do everything, colors and miscellaneous things. It just goes on and on and on and on, all the different things you can do to this. So now what we're going to do is go ahead and lower this back down. We're going to get it on the road, and we'll set up our speedometer. So now all I got to do is calibrate my speedometer. So I will see you guys out on the road. You make sure you check us out next Tuesday. We're going to have something else cool for you, so make sure you stay tuned. Instagram, Facebook, all that jazz. And make sure you subscribe, or you're going to miss what comes next, and you're going to feel bad about it.